Sorry, members, I'm just starting the live stream now.
Thank you.
Good evening, members, and welcome to the meeting of the Joint Transportation Board. First item of business this evening is the election of the chair. I understand Councillor Prater is going to be the chair for this municipal year. Please can I have a proposer and a seconder?
Can I propose as a Kent County Councillor?
It needs to be FHDC councillor.
Okay, I'm here as a.
I'm happy to propose then. Councillor Wing, I'm happy to propose.
And given the maths, I'm happy to second.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Prater, you are elected chair.
That's really kind. Thank you, John, and thank you, councillors. Been given a note to say good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Joint Transportation Board. Please note that this meeting is being streamed live to the internet, and please could all members ensure their microphone is set to mute unless they are speaking to reduce any background noise. Having dispensed with that, we will go to the agenda. And hello, Dylan. So we have dealt with the appointment of vice chair, which was item 1. Item 2 is the appointment of vice chair. And Kent County Council, I understand, have appointed Dylan Jeffrey as vice chair for 24-25. From the sound of it, this is for noting as opposed to for voting. Is that correct? Then duly noted. Congratulations, Dylan. You had to win something this week. And we'll go to item 3. Apologies for absence. Do we have any of those?
Thank you, Chair. We have received apologies from Councillors Alan Martin and Polly Blakemore, and Councillor Jim Martin should be here as substitute for Councillor Blakemore.
Okay, we will wait for Jim to pound through the door, but we will continue with the agenda until then. And then we'll go to item 4, declarations of interest. Sorry?
Also, apologies from Councillor Susan Carey.
Okay. We happy we've got those? Yeah. Great, thanks, guys. In that case, we'll go to item 4, declarations of interest. On any item on this agenda, have any councillors got any declaration of interest? I will note that I have asked that item 9, Sandgate High Street, 20 mph zone, was on the agenda. Note that A, it's on my item, and B, I live on Sandgate High Street, so it's a non-beginnery, but I'm declaring the interest in case somebody says it's making it less likely I get run over, because it is. Any other declarations of interest? Grand. In that case, we'll go to item 5, the minutes, which are on page 5 to 8 of our packs. Any questions, comments, or queries prior to agreeing? Can I have somebody propose those an accurate record if they're happy to do so? That's Jackie.
Proposed, Chair. Jackie,
I've seen. Thank you very much. Seconder. Dylan was in the room and seconded. All those in favour, please show. That is unanimous, although I can't see Connor's hands because his screen's not on.
Having problem getting my video on, but yeah, happy to in favour.
Lovely, thank you. Then we will move to item 6, the proposed parking restrictions pack, on pages 9 to 12 of our report. I hope either Paul or Fred are going to lead us through this item.
Yeah, evening one and all. Yeah, just the two there, which you've probably seen already. We've got the HGV weekend and overnight parking ban for Church Road, Cheriton, and at Westgate Industrial Estate. Beg your pardon.
I could see that there were supporting photographs for Church, and there's a third supporting photograph for Westgate as well.
Yeah,
just
that's right.
One lurking at the bottom there. Open to councillors then. Do we do anything other than accept the recommendations on those? Anyone wish to speak? Anyone wish to propose? outstanding enthusiasm by all concerned.
Suits me.
I'm happy to propose.
Jenny's worked out how to get out of this meeting earlier. Somebody happy to second?
Happy to second.
Thank you very much, Rory. We have a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour of the recommendations 3.1 to 3, please show. That is unanimous. Well, Connor, was you in favour as well?
In favour.
That is definitely unanimous. Great. Then we will go to item 7, which is the Highways Forward Works Programme, pages 13 to 30. Just let Frank join. Good evening, Frank. We're on to item 7, the Forward Works Programme. And Paul or Fred, are you able to guide us through this in any way? Or is it just as written?
This is KCC.
And presumably we have no KCC
No,
highways officer.
Yeah, I haven't seen James attend yet.
It does feel a little odd for them to be presenting reports to a committee that they're not then turning up to speak to. Dylan's obviously got a point on this. Dylan?
I'll mute myself. Yeah, I just had an email come through from James, which is that he said due to personal reasons, he's had to pull out the last minute, and all other highways officers that would be available, unfortunately, are on annual leave. So he does send apologies, but there's no one else available to attend the meeting from KCC engineers.
Does make you question quite what we do if we have questions on the reports which the Kent engineers have put forward to the meeting, but I'm sure we will take the minutes and make sure that they are sent to them appropriate and ask for them to come back in writing to any points that we make. So does anyone have any points that they wish to make which will be minuted and given to the highways officers for this agenda item? So and welcome, Jim. We're on agenda item 7 and walking through the Forward Works Programme. So
apologies for my late arrival.
It's all right, we're steaming through. So I'll just quickly go through section by section. If anyone wishes to speak on that section, please indicate. So section 1, Appendix A. Jackie, you have a comment.
Yes, I'm just a bit concerned because I've been watching the works that are being done under the active travel along the road into Cheriton, the main road. And if you look by Morrison's, there's a bus stop now where they've built up the pavement coming into the road is like 5 metres away from the road. And if it remains like that, it's now become a single lane of traffic. And I'm not seeing where they're going to put the bus stop, because if the bus is going to stop on the road there, we're going to have constant traffic jams going all the way back. So I'd just like some clarification that they're either going to move the bus stop to somewhere where there is room for cars to pass when the bus pulls in to the stop, or just give us some indication of what's happening. Thank you.
Unless anyone has a comment on that, I think all we can do is minute that and ask for a comment back in writing to the members of the board. Any other comments on Appendix A? Okay, I'll add mine. I'd like it minuted that Romney Avenue in Sandgate Valley has got a surface which is lunar, and please could somebody address it. That's in the minutes. I'll get an answer back from an officer explaining why not, but I'm having that one. If there's nothing else on Appendix Item A, then B, drainage. Anything anyone wishes to comment on or raise? Jenny.
Oh, just to say that I'm really pleased to see that there's a new drain, and the drain's being fixed along Aldington Road, which has caused a lot of flooding. So pleased to see that happening.
It's good to see good things happening. So that's good to see. Anyone else on drainage? that case, we'll go to Appendix C, street lighting. Anything to note on there? Obviously, a number of those are completed, a number of those are to be completed in the next 2 or 3 months. I'm not seeing any comments on those. So we'll go to Appendix D, transportation scheme, transportation and safety schemes. 4 items, 2 being designed in progress, 1 with National Highways and 1 all designed in progress, aren't they? Comments, questions? I'm going to say take that as a no, and then move through to externally funded schemes, noting the scheme being funded by Ivy Church Parish Council. I'm going to take the fact that nobody's moving, that we accept that. Oh, there's also an active travel scheme, which is in progress, and it's exactly what Jackie spoke about earlier, which is the cycle route between Harvey Grammar and Radnor Park. Appendix E, anything to question for the minutes? So that's developer funded works. Rory.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to find the electronic hand. I've failed.
It's fine. Wait for yours.
Can I raise Cheriton High Street? This is not, colleagues will be pleased to hear, my usual issue about the pedestrian crossing, although I will flag that I still think there is a need for a pedestrian light controls on that. But there's another issue which I've become aware of in the revised junction arrangements. I don't know how long after the junction is complete I can carry on calling it revised arrangements, because it's been there for a little while now. But I've had residents raise with me the slip roads into the western end of Cheriton High Street. If you're approaching from Cheriton Interchange from the motorway and turning right towards Tesco, and there are 2 lanes to turn right, and there's a very good reason for there being 2 lanes to avoid too much traffic building up back to the motorway junction. So it's a kind of holding operation. But once it turns right into the high street, it merges incredibly quickly into 1 lane. And I'm aware of an accident that happened just last week where both drivers in both lanes believe they have priority. And I think the arrangement is actually slightly counterintuitive. But irrespective of who has the right of way, I think it is actually a very rapid merger. And I have raised this with KCC's highways officers, but I think it's appropriate to raise it here as well. I would like some attention to be paid to the merging of those 2 lanes into 1, whether that's something that just requires some signage, some lines, or whether there's actually some further works that need to be done to make this safer. I mean, I'm only aware of 1 accident so far, and that was a minor one, and that's minor in the words of the person that was involved with it. But it does worry me that, having driven it myself just specifically last week to have a look at it, it does worry me that there are some further accidents waiting to happen. So I wonder whether we can note that concern, and if other colleagues are happy, if we can pass that on as a message arising out of this JTB, please.
Well, I'm certainly very happy to see that in the minutes, and fully has my support. And I'd also underline your ongoing underline my support for your ongoing point about the pedestrian crossings there. A number of times I have walked along there, and because you cannot see the vehicles coming from Tesco's and what filter that they've got, you genuinely have to guess as to whether you're about to whether this is going to hurt or not, and it's just unacceptable. I don't understand how it was planned, and I know this is history now, and the people who were around at the time, but I don't understand how it was put forward or how it was accepted. It's just dangerous. But I entirely accept your point on the filter as well. At the very least, if there was a clear indication on the road which lane was pulling into which lane, that would help. It's also exacerbated by traffic coming the other way off Cheriton High Street in the third slip, which having the two, they've merged from 2 lanes into 1, and then they get another one suddenly appears to their left-hand side as well, which does not help the situation. So, fully support. Jackie.
I'd just like to support both of you on everything that you've said about that junction. But I think we have to have a lessons learnt on this, because this has been going on for several years now, where whoever designed this and brought it forward and it was agreed on haven't taken pedestrians or perhaps some traffic safety into full consideration. I would also point out that when you come off of the motorway, because I go through this very, very regularly, and then you're in the left-hand lane, which is the filter lane to go down towards Cheriton High Road. The traffic signals there, when the green light for to go forward comes on, that can actually be very misleading for those in the right-hand lane. So you're also exacerbating a situation there as well. So I still think that there's quite a lot of work to make this junction as it should be, and I'm quite happy to support anyone taking this forward. Thank you.
I absolutely agree on that left-hand lane and the lights on that as well. It's deeply bizarre how many traffic lights there are there, some of which you get to ignore and some of which you get to obey, and you kind of have to guess. I'm wondering whether it would be appropriate for us asking, as there are sort of 3 or 4 points around that, some, as you say, deeply historical, some of them more recent, whether it's appropriate to ask an officer to make sure that for our next meeting they are addressed directly in writing, those points, or an officer can come to speak to those points. So whether that's a separate agenda item or whether that's within one of their reports, that they deal more with that junction holistically, because there are a number of points to catch up on there, I think. If no one has any objection to that, then we'll ask KCC to bring that forward. I'll ask that to be brought forward onto our next agenda as a specific item, one way or t'other. Okay.
Can I, sorry, Chair, can I just, I mean, one of the difficulties, because it seems quite bizarre that something which should be fairly simple, like the pedestrian controls, is taking so long. One of the difficulties is that the Highways Authority finds itself in a position where the planning application was granted many years ago, back in 2016, and the planning application showed a very detailed layout, and alas, it got through at the district council. Which is slightly bizarre. There were lights shown further along at the top of Horn Street, but there was no crossing lights shown at the Cheriton Interchange junction. And you know, one would have thought that if officers hadn't picked it up, then some of the members of the District Council Planning Committee at the time might have done. But alas, it managed to get through all the way. And so I would imagine the developers who are funding the junction arrangements were, you know, thinking to themselves, well, that was a lot easier than we thought, and that, I'm afraid, is part of the difficulty. So it's not just about what can be done now and who can fund it, because the developers are saying, well, you never required us to do it. That's what we're up against, I think. But again, we may be able to have more detail about that at a future meeting, as you propose.
I fully understand your point, and I fully understand that somebody will turn around and go, well, we've got no money for this. However, I'm not content for us to leave it until there is a major RTC there, which we've all see coming, and for somebody to then turn around and go, well, you never raised it, because we do continue to raise it. And 2015 was during my long sabbatical from folks in the High District Council. So wasn't me. but entirely accept the point. I find it odd, though, that KCC officers and highways officers did not flag when that junction was put forward and that planning application was put forward, and the detailed plans, as you said, were put forward, that what was being proposed there from their expert point of view was dangerous, because it is. Okay, moving through any other items on that Appendix E, which are not Cheriton High Street related. In that case, we have Appendix F, bridge works. Comments, additions, deletions, suggestions? Nope. Appendix G, traffic systems.
Sorry,
Chair, I think Tony's flagging.
Okay,
yeah,
sorry, Tony.
I've been flagging because like I have to change screens and to get my hand signal up my laptop, I'm too late because you're too quick.
I apologise. I couldn't see your hand moving for the B behind you.
Well, yeah, all right. It's got a stick in its tail. But yes, what I'm going to say was that on bridges, one thing I'm taking up, just let you know, really, I'm very concerned about the Rowie Bridge going into Lydd. It's going to get an awful lot of traffic going over it in the near future. There's this calendar year is planned to have 1,500 lorry movements alone to form a base at Dungeness A. And I'll be asking James to talk to Network Rail and make sure it's fit for purpose. It hasn't been checked for quite a long time, I think. But just let you know, that's something I'm taking up with him separately.
That's excellent. For those of us who aren't expert on every road name through Lydd and whether a bridge goes over it or not, is that the Derville Road Lydd Bridge on?
No, that's
a different bridge.
The Derville runs on the coast. Again, that one is very weak and it's not a main road. Curtin Road, on the other hand, is slightly further up the coast. It's the emergency access from a nuclear power station, and all the staff come that way rather than Battery Road. I'm looking at the other side of Lydd, which is Romney Road, when it comes into Lydd down there. Okay. And they used to use a slip road alongside it for heavy traffic, but that road is now so derelict, I don't think it can be used. And as NDA don't want to put any money towards it, I think we're going to have to check the bridge out.
Okay, thank you. I hope that's been minuted and noted.
Thank you.
And Connor, I can see your hand up.
Thanks, Tim. Just the traffic signals for Blackpool Road near Mead Road. Just if we can get a follow up when that work comes online, so we've just got plenty of time, so we know what's happening with that.
Grant, I'm sure that's minuted, and again we can ask for some feedback in writing from Toby or the other appropriate officer. Rory, yours has it.
Yeah, thanks. This is probably a question that's not going to be able to be answered, but the on the second of these traffic systems, Bouverie Road West, convert to near-sided pedestrian facilities. Am I right in thinking that, if anybody can help on this, am I right in thinking that this is where the display of the red or green person is not on the other side of the road, but it is restricted only to the side from which you set off? If that is the case, then I'm always going to raise a concern about these things, because although technically the idea is, as I understand it, that once you've got the green signal, you start crossing, and then the technology will take over and ensure that you are tracked as you go across the road, and the system will spot that there's somebody walking across the road and won't then change the traffic signals to allow the traffic to move. Well, that's all very well, but some people like to have the reassurance as a kind of fail-safe that they are, that the traffic signals aren't going to start changing, and people like actually to be able to look up and see the display on the other side of the road and see that it is still safe to go across. This is a point that's recognized in some cities where they not only have the green person, but they also have a countdown timer to give people again, some reassurance that they still have either between 10 and 0 seconds to finish their journey across the road. So I just wonder if that's what is proposed, that it's one of these signals where once you've set off on your pedestrian route across the road, you have no further knowledge, then I'm not happy with it. I will continue to fight my case for those types of signals that give people reassurance.
Okay, I can see Dylan's hand and then Jenny's.
Yeah, I mean, one of the issue with those signals was raised as well along Cherry Garden Avenue at the top when they put in new signals, and I had a very detailed explanation along with the relevant leaflets and all the rest. I think perhaps it would be helpful, Chairman, if at the next meeting we get an explanation of how these new signal systems will work across the district, as they are now being deployed everywhere, as opposed to the old version of signals, to enable reassurance both of members of the committee, but also enable them to pass that assurance on to their constituents. It was very helpful. It did explain it thoroughly and actually gave pedestrians a lot more time, and therefore was considerably more safe. But I think it just needs explaining and made clear.
I'm very happy that we will ask for a item on our next agenda for them to explain that to me. I think it'll take some explaining. Jenny has indicated that she wasn't indicating. So unless there are any other items under Appendix G for noting, we will roll on. Appendix H, this should be quite quick. There are none. Appendix I, Street Works. And Dylan, I can see your hand.
Yeah, it's not actually listed, but I just thought I'd raise it anyway. I think it was in the minutes. It's around the Road of Remembrance and the closure. So following many joint appeals by myself and Polly, actually, from the District Council, we've finally got in place now. There'll be 33 new semi-permanent diversion signs put in place across the area. So there'll be some, for example, Bouverie Road West, the Ford Road roundabout, top of Tram Road, all sorts of locations, which I know Polly has also been asking for a number of weeks now. So these will be put in by the end of this week, I'm assured. So that's 33 new temporary diversion signs and advance warning of the closure. So hopefully it'll avoid people getting as far as they need to, and then suddenly realising that the Road of Remembrance is actually closed. And that will be in operation up until we manage to hopefully get it reopened by the end of the year.
Thank you. That's reassuring. I have to admit, when I saw 33 signs were about to, semi-permanent signs were about to be deployed, I suspected that meant that it was going to take longer to be repaired than I was going to hope. But I think we're all on the same page that we're now not expecting it to open for the summer, and if we can have it open for Christmas, we'll be pleased with that. Frank, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, apologies for being late, because I just couldn't find the link. It took me an awful long time. So I was apparently trying to join was a meeting that was going to be held in February next year.
Congratulations for being early for that meeting.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure where to. I wanted to raise this with James. Obviously not here, but I'm not sure where in the meeting it should have been raised. But we recently had the road closed between Beechborough Roundabout and Limage for 3 or 4 days for resurfacing and various other works that they were doing. The road closure was from 8 till 5, and the diversion route, the only one that could be possibly used, was the A20 and Sandling Road Cosec, which is, on the whole, a single track road. It caused absolute chaos between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning when you've got all the people going to work, all the school traffic, without the buses going through as well. I wanted an answer why they couldn't have left the road closure till 9 o'clock, because once 9 o'clock was clear, we didn't have any more problems. It was just that first hour that was absolute chaos.
Okay, thank you. That's absolutely on the record. And, I think we can ask an officer to come back directly on that point. It would be appropriate to, again, either just respond to that point directly, or I think that there are a number of issues around timetabling and prioritisation of competing bits of work. We have had an issue today where we've got long-standard works in Risborough Lane for instance, which has closed Risborough Lane and works there, and they decided to close Horn Street Bridge for resurfacing works for 6 or 7 hours during the course of the day. The comedy which ensues off that, as it becomes suddenly very hard to get around parts of town, it just seemed avoidable. It just seemed that they could have timetabled those works to be at different times and saved themselves a considerable amount of congestion. But if we can make sure that the point's minuted so that Frank gets a reply directly on that one, that would be great. And Jackie, I can see your hand up.
Chair, I was just about to bring up Risborough because I look a lot on Facebook. It was causing absolute chaos for school runs and people actually trying to get around the area. There must be a way, a better way of integrating planned works so that there are ways for people to still be able to use the road system. So I'd just like to raise that along with yourself, that a little bit more integrated planning on this would be very, very appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, in that case, we'll make that the slightly wider point that we'll ask officers to come back to on another agenda item next week, for the next meeting, and they're going to be increasingly delighted about not attending this one. And as we've reached the end of the appendices on that report, I think we can only then note that report with our comments made and hope for response to those comments and or agenda items for the next meeting, and I'll make sure that I chase those for the minute. Unless there are any other comments on that report, we will move on to the next item. Then that's going to be item 8, the Kent County Council update. Does anybody feel that this is about to be tricky? Item 1. So we're looking for an update on 3 sets of extended double yellow lines that have been looked at in April on Twist Road, Martello Drive and the A259, and the junction between Pennypot Industrial Estate and the A259. Does any officer from Kent County Council wish to respond to that item? Jenny, you can speak.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wondered if perhaps they might have passed on the update to Dylan Jeffrey, potentially.
Did they happen to have passed anything to Paul or Fred either?
Oh, I haven't seen anything come through from KCC regarding any proposals or anything for this, so I know as much as what's on the list there.
Okay, well, as for all 4 of these items, what is on the list there is essentially the question as opposed to the answer. I'm afraid I think we're going to have to take it whereby, again, we are asking for an answer in writing to all 4 of these questions from the appropriate Kent County Council officer. I understand that there are always timetabling difficulties around meetings, but this is quite a difficult meeting to hold without the officer, the Kent Highways officer, who has read the brief and had the updates being available at it. It would have been possible if those updates had been circulated in advance that we could have just noted and moved on, but without circulating them in advance or without having them at the meeting, all we can ask is that they are produced in writing to all members after this meeting, I think, in those instances, unless any other members have a view. Okay, I'm going to take that for the 4 items there, because I think all 4 of them are going to fall under the same category on item 8. Okay. We're powering through. Don't worry, I'll slow it down. Item 9 then, AOB. Now, this is, I have, for those of you, I have sent you an email this afternoon with some more detail around this and some pictures, as I'm very bad at describing pictures. So I'll just go through this a little bit of an introduction verbally, if I may, and then other people can come back on this. First, I'd like to say thank you to Dylan for agreeing as former chair for this item to be taken onto the agenda, because it was discretionary, despite hundreds of signatures on both paper and the then massively broken KCC petition website. We did not have enough signatures directly to force a discussion of the proposal to JTB. So it's at the chair's discretion. I'm really grateful for him allowing it and for us to do so now. Essentially, the issue that we have in terms of bringing forward a proposal for a 20-mile-an-hour zone through Sandgate is that Kent Highways officers are concerned that it will cause a precedent along the length of the A259, and if you do it in Sandgate, everybody else will want one too. And they want to have explanations of why Sandgate is different and why it wouldn't cause a precedent right the way through to the East Sussex border. So briefly, and by briefly I mean give me 5 minutes, I'm going to try and explain that for the tape so officers have enough to work on. Firstly, I'm going to say that Sandgate High Street has got some of the issues it has because, unlike others, it hasn't been tackled in the past. Centre of Folkestone, for instance, Sandgate Road was fully pedestrianised decades ago. They fixed that by not having any traffic at all, let alone a speed limit. Hythe High Street, similarly, bypassed. It would have had problems, but they went round it, and that was dealt with that way. There have been changes to road safety along the route for many years. It's just that Sandgate didn't get any, and I fully accept and I'm not asking for a Sandgate bypass at this moment. Can't have that, but if we could have some road safety measures to keep people safe, that is what we are seeking. And in terms of discussing the topography and differences which make Sandgate different, you're coming from the direction of Folkestone, you come down Sandgate Hill into the village, and then you take a fairly sharp right turn. You've passed two concealed entrances to your left-hand side and now already in a narrow part of the high street. And that's the first key point of difference between Sandgate and the rest of the A259, it's literally the only part of the A259, coming from Folkestone to Rye, with a hill in it. Through Folkestone, Hythe, Romney Marsh, all flat. The only place you've got a hill is you come down Sandgate Hill and you arrive in Sandgate Village. You have speeds building up, and without care, you end up over speed on both the hill and the approach to the village at the bottom. So one of the reasons why Sandgate is unique and different to the rest of the A259 is that you approach it down the hill from Folkestone. Then you come along the high street and you have a series of difficult to make left turns as the roads are narrow. So you're looking to go Lackland Way in order to go into the Castle Road car park, Granville Parade East and the Parade, all very tight left-hand turns with very narrow pavements each side and buildings. Granting the junction into Granville Parade West is a bit wider, but aside from an access to flats, it's also a dead end. Also, down each of those last three roads, you have close sea glimpses, which are the first ones that you've actually got anywhere from Folkestone, and in fact, pretty much all the way to Hythe. So actually, they are also unique because they don't apply all the way down beyond Seabrook. You can't see the sea anymore. On the right-hand side, going on the high street, you've got a series of roads with a steep down gradient joining the high street. And they're quite difficult. Military Road is the first, with a wide junction profile, which is difficult for pedestrians to cross. And yes, a crossing island for that is already in the Sandgate Highway Improvement Plan, but it wouldn't change any gradient. It would just change the ability of pedestrians to get halfway across and have somewhere to stop. Gough Road has a flat access junction, but then you've got a sequence of the Undercliff and North Road. And then Wilberforce Road twice, which have really steep gradients with walls each side and very narrow pavements on the A259. So you have really very limited visibility as you pull onto the A259. The only way you can do it is you're coming downhill, you're holding it on a brake, and you're coming into the A259. And by the time you can see right in order to pull into the A259, you've already got your nose in the running track. Wilberforce Road at the far end also has a gradient. It's two-way, so you have traffic coming in and out of there, and you get to come onto the high street emerging from behind a bus stop. And if the bus is there, it's even more exciting pulling into the A259. And there, again, because there are no other hills between Sandgate and Rye, there are no other sections of the A259 with these approach gradients because there are no other hills. So again, that's unique to Sandgate. That length of the high street is very narrow. It's got narrow pavements each side, and the buildings are very close to the road. I think the only comparable profile to that on the A259 is through Central Dymchurch. I'd suggest Dymchurch also does have a case to make for a limited stretch of 20 mile an hour, but I won't make that for them. Also, they don't have the sea views at any point because you've got the seawall in the way. I'd contend that New Romney has a wider road and that the majority of the pavements in New Romney High Street are a little wider, and they're also, again, not right by the seafront and you've not got people travelling to the sea. So the narrow pavements and buildings quite so close to the road, which are obscuring junction visibility, is unique to Sandgate. I'm also delighted to say that Sandgate currently has a very busy high street. It's possibly one of the busiest in the area and has no vacant units. Actually, one went vacant last week without an offer on them. In the last year, we've had a new bar open, 2 delis, both for seating outside, a cycle cafe and more, adding to the already eclectic mix. Many of those businesses have pavement seating and the area is buzzing with people evenings and weekends. Now, I've lived there for 20 years and it has never been that busy on evenings and weekends. It's great, but it also adds to the risk when you've got 30 mile an hour traffic on the road they're situated on. And then we get to Sandgate Esplanade, which is the only seafront section of road with sea views along the length of the A259. So that's also unique to Sandgate. It is also, for drivers, especially visitors, distracting. Oh, look, the sea. And it also has the coastal cycle path, which comes along it until it comes away from the A259 towards Seabrook. And then again, from on the right, you're continuing your sequence of roads with a steep gradient joining the Esplanade. You've got Encombe, Prospect Road, Wellington Place, Sunnyside Road and Castle Bay, many of which also have limited visibility with walls each side and narrow pavements. To be able to see if you're clear to go, you're pretty much in the A259. Now, KCC talk about requiring an accident record in order to act, and it is by the junction of Prospect Road that was a fatality just 6 months ago. A couple of weeks ago, there was another serious accident involving a child nearer the junction with Castle Bay. Now, I have absolutely no evidence to suggest, and I'm not doing so, that either was caused by vehicles exceeding the current speed limit. But I do have significant evidence to suggest that if the speed limit was lower and being obeyed, accidents under 20 mile an hour have a better turnout than accidents under 30 miles an hour. And at least one of those accidents, we know, involved the steep gradient approach road and very limited visibility joining the A259 from that road. That was a contributory factor for the fact that when the child arrived in the road, the car didn't see him until it was too late. I'd also like to say that the KCC accident report, which they rely on, is woefully incomplete. So I have personally had to act as a witness in a court case where a car drove into the dropped tailgate of a lorry parked on Sandgate High Street, where the tailgate then they drove into it and the tailgate went through their windscreen, which got pretty close to decapitating the driver. I've personally, outside my Sandgate High Street home, come out of my flat, turned left, and was walking towards Folkestone only to hear a bang behind me, and then a second thud. Breathed for a second, turned round and found that a car had smashed into a parked car, pushing that onto where I'd been stood 3 seconds earlier. All bar 3 seconds, I wouldn't have been here commentating this meeting this evening. I'll leave you to consider how sad that would be. There is an accident record on that road. There is an accident, and KCC just don't seem to know about it. The information is not passed to them. KCC have actually acknowledged many times that there is considerable cross A259 pedestrian traffic. Very unusually along the A259, you have 3 formalised crossings in relatively short order. So but you've got one near the junction with Military Road, you've got a zebra crossing just by about number 110 Sandgate High Street, and you've got another zebra crossing at Brewers Hill, which is a very short number of formalised crossings in that short distance. Think where else you can think of another of those on the A259. Now, they would not have been installed without the volume of crossings being understood and being seen as an issue. Now, personally, I think that the A259 Sandgate Hill, Sandgate High Street and Sandgate Esplanade merit a 20 mile an hour zone across the entire length of it. And if it doesn't meet the current policy, then we should change the policy or override the policy. But that's above my pay grade because that's with Kent County Council and they will need to do so. Can't do that at this meeting. because I think it's a poor policy when it refuses to acknowledge and respond to a clear need and a clear accident record, and that I think Kent County Council should change that policy, at least in regards to this scheme. However, pragmatically, I also understand that there is very limited funding, and although I'd like a full scheme along that road right now, I'm unlikely to get one, and I'm unlikely to get a funded one. So instead, what I've circulated to councillors earlier today is that I've worked with an expert road planner to devise a scheme that at least starts the process and brings Sandgate High Street under a 20-mile-an-hour zone, which should start to slow traffic on the approaches from both sides too. Now, why just Sandgate High Street? It's basically because you can't introduce a 20-mile-an-hour zone without mitigation unless the speeds or average speeds are under 24 miles an hour already. In Sandgate High Street, the speeds are under 24 miles an hour already on all of their test results. So it is possible in Sandgate High Street without additional and expensive speed mitigation areas to install a 20-mile-an-hour zone, whereas on Sandgate Esplanade, where I would also like it, the speeds are a touch above 24 miles an hour, so they can't under their existing policy without ignoring the policy. When I said that it's an expert scheme and I've had an expert helping me put together, he used to design these schemes for Kent County Council. He's the guy who used to run traffic schemes for Kent County Council. He's called Graham Wickendham, and I'm very grateful for his support. Many of the policies which we're trying to fight at the moment, he wrote, and he claims he would have amended over the interim 10 years as experience from elsewhere in the country has come forward. So the scheme which circulated was simply a 20-mile-an-hour zone on the Sandgate High Street, around Sandgate High Street between Lackland Way and Sandgate Esplanade, with lines and signs to support. Speeds are already almost 20 mph on average, and with new signage and lines, they're likely to drop a little further, lower the speed, and improve the outcomes to any accident. Speeds on the approach from both Folkestone and Hythe should drop a little too, as people slow towards the 20-mile-an-hour zone. I'll make no secret of the fact that if we can get them lower and prove that they're lower over a period of time, then I'm then going to try and extend that scheme either way. Now, a fair question from Rory Love. When we've discussed this scheme, and we have discussed that as county district members about the scheme, is your question with the scheme was, what do we mean? Do we mean a 20-mile-an-hour road or a zone? And Graham and I think it's a zone, because we would include Granville Parade East, Granville Parade, the Parade, Granville Road West, Gough Road, the Undercliff, North Road, the Crescent, Wilberforce Road and Hillside. Essentially all of the roads which run into Sandgate High Street along that point. Now, I don't know if you've driven all of those roads as frequently as I have, but you can't reasonably exceed 20 mile an hour in those roads anyway. If you're doing more than 20 miles an hour along the Crescent, I salute you. The impact, therefore, is mainly about reducing the need for signage joining those roads in the zone, rather than the practical impact of reducing the speed in those. And I'm saying that with KCC goodwill and support, we could introduce that basics 20 mile an hour scheme for the cost of the lines, the signs and the fees. And if KCC could just cover the cost of their fees, I'll seek alternative financial support. So this will be an externally funded scheme for getting the plans drawn up. So that will be free of charge to KCC. And I'll seek to find the funding for the lines and signs as well. And I'd hope that over the months following that, we could introduce traffic mitigation at the end of the doubt on those plans on the Hythe side, and speed indication devices as well. Then they could be added into the scheme as we go forward. The more of that you've got reminding people to slow down as you're coming into the scheme, the more it will slow the speed on the Esplanade, which is A, good for today, and B, allows you to look at actually extending that 20 mile an hour scheme along the Esplanade as well then. We've got to be clear that the A259 through Sandgate has had 2 really bad accidents since November. That doesn't make it worse than it was a year ago, but it is a bad indication. 1 child is dead, another is seriously injured, and Sandgate residents are really insistent that we don't wait for a 3rd or 4th one before KCC allow us to act. So yes, it's a low-cost starter scheme. It will help slow traffic, and we can evaluate how it slows traffic, and it meets as many of KCC's current policies as possible. Where it doesn't meet the KCC policy, we would be asking them from this committee to override that policy. We're asking them to do so. because we think Sandgate is different on that 20 mile an hour zone. So I'd like the minutes to show that the members of this board strongly support a 20 mph zone through Sandgate and feel that the case has been made that sufficient differences to other locations to not cause a precedent to frighten officers by putting a precedent all the way up and down the high street. So that's what I'd like the minutes to show, that we ask that, and that they either bring forward back to a future meeting a proposal for a full scheme right the way through Sandgate, Esplanade, High Street and Sandgate Hill, if they think that the accident case is now made for a 20 mile an hour zone with mitigation, or alternatively accept this locally funded scheme so that we can take that forward and make that happen and actually start the process of slowing traffic there. I apologise that that took so long, and I can see a series of hands. I saw Jenny indicate, and as Jackie and Tony have also got their hands up, I'm going to go with Jenny first. She's got a physical hand up, and then I'll take Jackie and Tony, if that's okay. And then Dylan.
Thank you. I couldn't actually see where to put the virtual hand. I completely agree that this is needed along Sandgate High Street. In addition to what you've said, I know that there was another fatality there a few years ago involving a cyclist. I think that was at the bottom of Military Road, and I've been through there quite a few times and seen near misses. Yeah, I completely agree that it is different to many of the areas, and like you say, Dymchurch could also do with something as well. But I think Sandgate in particular, and it is quite scary for parents in the area whose children are sort of, starting to go out on their own as well, and it's a really, really dangerous road. So I completely support what you're proposing here, Tim.
Thank you. I've got Jackie and then Tony and then Dylan.
I think Tony was first. He's had his hand up quite a while.
I'll happily cede. Tony?
You're a lovely lady, Jackie. I've always said that. But, Tim, I totally agree with you. It might be a surprise for some people, but I've been arguing that we should have a reduction of speed across the whole marsh. I would like to see 20 in all urban areas and 40 on all open roads. Ivy Church have done it. It cost them an awful lot of money to put that in. But the only question I would have, do you have the support of the police?
I'll get it. I mean, I've consulted with KCC officers. No, I haven't consulted with the police directly. I'm happy to do so before anything was brought forward.
I think that's the only stumbling block I would say, is see what they say. But I'm all for this because speed does kill. And, well, what can I say? So I hand over to Jackie. One more eloquent.
Thank you. I then have Jackie, Dylan, and then Rory.
Thank you, Tony. Tim, you know that I've supported you from this ever since the first child fatality happened, which is why I brought it up at KCC Transportation. I think you've made the case very strongly why Sandgate High Street is different from other parts. So I totally support you in this. Whether it then goes on to be a wider scheme, we'll see what happens going forward. But what I would say as a driver going through there, quite often because of how people are parked down there, you're weaving across the road to avoid them. So there is a big issue throughout. And I actually do believe you're right that a 20 mile an hour zone, it will help keep pedestrians safer, but it would also help prevent further accidents regarding cars to cars as well. So you have my total support on this one.
Dylan.
Okay, I'm neither supporting it nor opposing it. I think it needs to be made a little bit clearer. I've looked at your plans, Tim, and I'm trying to get in my mind other speed limits along, from Folkestone. So you've got change basically in variable speed limits from Folkestone in between down to Sandgate, then after Sandgate along to Seabrook and High. So I just need to, in my own mind, obviously a bit more information around the length of the actual length, or in terms of how many meters we're talking about, the variables then in between before new speed limits take place, I think would be useful. You mentioned it would be locally funded, and there's always a situation where we see this, and in fact schemes may be initially locally funded, but there's ongoing maintenance costs and other costs involved, and not least, of course, police costs if they were to enforce it. So again, I think a bit more information would be needed, not from yourself, it would need to come from KCC, around the actual costs in terms of the number of roundels, etc., for what we're actually talking about. In terms of the work you did and obviously used the information available for average speed limits, obviously if we did move ahead with this, then there would be a proper in-depth analysis of speed. We know that 21-an-hour zones often only reduce speed by about 2 miles an hour. On average, so there's not a dramatic reduction in speed. So again, any proposal would need to be looked at with further information provided as necessary around how effective it might be. So as I say, I'm not opposed to it. I think there is certainly scope, perhaps, if you could get the local funding or the parish council funding to move ahead with the proposal. If it was agreed to, so that we can actually do the preamble work, if you like, in terms of the proposed traffic regulation order and all the research and analysis that's needed to make it actually happen. But at the moment, on the information provided to us, and I recognise the work that has been done, and I'm very thankful for it. However, it's not enough information for me to say yay or nay. And I also do appreciate as well, it's quite an emotive subject, given the recent accidents that have happened in the area. And I know it's on your patch, Tim and Rory, and I was involved also with the Brown family after the tragic accident that occurred further along. So I just think we just need perhaps a little bit more information. Certainly the police, as Tony has indicated, is there sufficient resource to actually police this? Or is there scope, perhaps, in the interim for the parish council to look at, drive safely through this area, for example, signs that actually, raise the issue, maybe, discretionary speed signs that try and, slow down motorists, as we have on a number of highways elsewhere.
I'll come back to a number of those points in a minute, and I'm sure that Rory is about to tell you what the speed checks that have already been done are. Rory.
No, I'm not actually. I mean, you have done some work on the average speeds, and the average speeds actually in the area that's described are pretty low, and certainly eastbound, a 20-mile limit would make virtually no difference at all, because that's the speed that people are doing anyway. But I mean, I think Dylan raises some important points about the funding. In a way, that's a kind of technical point, and there will be an answer about that. Who will actually carry on the ongoing maintenance? Because one of the issues we had recently, when there was a proposal for a fairly extensive traffic scheme in Cheriton, was that the initial part of the scheme would be picked up by a government grant, but then that'll burden the taxpayers, local taxpayers, with the scheme for years to come. I think we need some clarity around that. But as I say, that's a technical point rather than a point of principle. But we could just do with that. The other thing that does strike me is, I mean, you've talked about the two recent accidents. They are not within this zone, and I think, in fairness, you did make that point. And when you said that your plan is to use this as a kind of introduction to having a much wider zone that would go all along the Esplanade, but I think we should be quite clear that this scheme would not have a major impact on traffic speeds on the Esplanade. You might argue that it takes, a few hundred meters for traffic to come up to 30 again on the Esplanade, or whatever is the reasonable speed on the Esplanade at the time, which may be less than 30. And it may be that people slow down slightly in advance of it, but I'm not entirely convinced that that would happen. I think the impact of this scheme, if it has any impact, would be within the high street alone. And the reason that I've said when we had a meeting at Sandgate Parish Council, the reason I said I think the case has really got to be made well for why there needs to be a scheme within the high street is because we know that people ignore 20-mile-an-hour speed limits unless they can see the reason for them. So if there's a speed limit by a school or by a hospital, people can understand the reason and they slow down. If they're just in a 20 zone and they really can't see the reason because it looks just like any other village high street, then what they'll tend to do is to go for the speed where they feel that it's safe to drive. Now that's probably most times during the day, not much faster than 20 to 25 in Sandgate, but there are other times of the day when they will feel that they can get to more or less the speed limit, 30. And I think we run the risk of desensitizing people to 20-mile-an-hour zones unless we can make a very strong case for it. And that strong case is not, in my view, is not enhanced by using evidence which is outside the zone. Just two other slight technical points. It would be helpful to understand where the proposed zone would start in Military Road and Castle Road, because it's not shown on the plans that you've put forward, and I think that would also be quite helpful. But overall, I think we would need to have, I regret the fact that we don't have a KCC officer here, because I do think we need to have a fuller explanation of the benefits that are perceived from having one of these zones, and they may not be the benefits that we all think would happen, compared with the cost of doing the zone and the kind of precedent that it might create. Now, I mean, you've done a very good case, Chairman, on making a case for Sandgate as being distinctly different because it's got hills. Okay, that's pretty creative. But I think across, from a county council's point of view, we've got to look at these high streets right across Kent for the sort of precedent that might be created. I think there's some further work. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I think there is a bit more work to be done on that. And I think it would be useful to have an officer here to explain what the likely cost would be that would fall on council taxpayers for Kent County Council over the years ahead, what the scheme would cost to implement, and what sort of impact we think it might actually bring. Because it's one thing for us to pat ourselves on the back and say we've got a 20-mile-an-hour zone, but if people aren't doing 20 miles an hour, but we end up creating a kind of false sense of security for pedestrians, then we're not actually doing ourselves any favors, and that's something which has been found in other parts of the country before now. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Frank.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got to leave this meeting shortly, but before I go, I suggest you had a word with Wingham Parish Council. They fairly recently had a 20-mile-an-hour limit on the 256 Canterbury to Sandwich Road, right through the middle of the village. And what sort of impact it's made there. It might be worth you talking to them.
I thank you for that, and I also thank you for the precedent which is set there, which is that KCC are happy to accept a 20-mile-an-hour zone on the A256 going through Wingham, but don't seem to be happy to accept one on the 259 going through Sandgate. There are other A roads in the county whereby a 20-mile-an-hour zone is in place. the concept has been accepted there. I don't really understand why it's not being accepted elsewhere. I can't see anyone else indicating to speak at this moment. I have a few comments to make on follow-up. I can see Dylan's indicating. I don't know if anyone wants to speak.
Yeah, Chairman, it's actually about your point about, you know, whether we could get this extended. I actually think the zone that's needed is further along, you know, in terms of where the beach area is. And I wondered if we did have something come back, we could actually look at a broader scheme, not just the Sandgate Town Centre, but one that goes further along, perhaps as far as Castle Bay or whatever.
You did read my mind. What I was going to suggest that I was going to ask the minutes to show that this board asked highways officers and the Cabinet Member of Transport to consider and either bring back a report to this board, a scheme for a 20-mile-an-hour zone and other safety measures along the length of the A259 through Sandgate Esplanade and Sandgate High Street. But if they cannot do that and will not fund that and will not bring it forward, to at least accept as a locally funded scheme the proposal of the 20-mile-an-hour zone through Sandgate High Street. I'm trying to deal with getting through policies of KCC, and if they can't come back with a scheme which that allows them to accept that policy scheme, then we're in a hole. So I entirely agree with you, Dylan, that what I want is a traffic speed reduction scheme along Sandgate Esplanade and through Sandgate High Street. Everyone does. What KCC officers tell me I cannot have is a 20-mile-an-hour zone on Sandgate Esplanade without speed mitigation measures, and that you can't afford those speed mitigation measures. If we can square that circle, I'll take it. Absolutely 100%, and thank you very much for doing so. So if I'm very happy for us to propose that we're going to bring that we ask them to come back with looking at that and looking for solutions to do that for our next meeting, please. And I accept that I don't want fully funded, fully costed, yes, you can do it next week schemes for next week, but I'd actually like them to show some variety of indication of support for the concept and some thinking towards a scheme which deals with those multitude of issues. And although I'm grateful to Rory for his belief in my that I managed to put together a good scheme, and that using hills was ingenious, I have to admit that hills were not my invention. They were there first. I'm merely using the topography and how that impacts with the roads, how it impacts with traffic movements, to make a case. I thought ingeniously, if not, but it is absolutely true that as you're approaching the road at a junction and you're holding it on the brake, you have less control than if you're holding it on the flat, and particularly if you're having to come into the running track in order to do so. Well, a couple of things just on cost. As I said, the scheme cost that we're looking at there was a lines and signs scheme. So you're effectively removing 30-mile-an-hour signs and replacing them with 20-mile-an-hour signs, and you're doing some additional road lineage, which actually, I agree that we haven't seen that the lines painted in Sandgate for the last 10 years, but should be done more regularly than that anyway. So somebody actually painting stuff on the floor shouldn't take that much money. But if the answer is in 20 years' time at the end of a sign, at the end of the lifetime of a sign on the road, that needs to be looked at in terms of capital cost for future local funding. I'm happy to discuss. But there aren't many expensive and physical changes involved there. It's the front cost is some changes of speed signs and some lines. Currently, the speed profile from Folkestone right the way through to the other end of Hythe is 30-mile-an-hour throughout. The 20-mile-an-hour zone would apply from the junction with Lackland Way to the end of Coastguard Cottages by Sandgate Esplanade, a stretch of about 600 metres, which was one of the technical questions that you asked. I think in terms of Rory's question, the 20-mile-an-hour zone would apply in Castle Road only at the signs indicate it would only apply at the end of Castle Road as you turned into the zone. Castle Road itself effectively wouldn't be in it. And again, if you can get 20 miles an hour, more than 20 miles an hour down that section of Castle Road, you're doing something inventive anyway. So you'd have a sign there indicating that you're turning into the 20-mile-an-hour zone. I would suggest that it would start in Military Road, just above the junction with Gough Road, so that then Gough Road is covered by the zone. So you'd come into Military Road and the signs would be just to the upside of the junction with Gough Road. So it literally would cover about 10 metres of Military Road. I think they are the technologies. The one other point to make is that in terms of the speeds on Sandgate Esplanade, I agree with you that what we are doing is looking at planning that the speed reduction as you arrive at the 20-mile-an-hour zone will slow the traffic along the Esplanade. Now, as somebody who's doing weekly speed watch on Sandgate Esplanade at the moment and stands by the junction of Encombe and Sandgate High Street, monitoring the speed of traffic, with an indicator sign showing them that speed of traffic, and often stationing somebody at the other side of the road to watch the brake lights coming onto those vehicles as they approach, suddenly go, oh my God, there's somebody with a sign there and braking. I can tell you that those signs make a difference. Speed indication signs make a difference. Active signs like that do make a difference. A sign saying, please slow down, will have very little of impact unless it moves. But it does make an impact, and actually the parish council and volunteers and residents have already been working on speed mitigation throughout Sandgate. We haven't been waiting for KCC to come and fix this. We've been doing it ourselves. And if anyone else wants to join one of the 3 or 4 Sandgate Speedwatch sessions during the course of every week that we are holding, you'd be delighted to welcome you and show you what we're doing. Dylan, you have your hand back up.
Yes, just to say, I mean, any report would obviously be with more detailed funding, because we know the average costs. So to put a new scheme in, you're looking up to £2,000 a day for closure of the road whilst the changes are made. Traffic regulation order would be around £2,385. Each new sign will cost around £540 each. For a non-illuminated sign. Illuminated signs obviously cost more. Carrying out the survey, another 500. Speed limiter repeater signs, 235. Painted carriageway roundels, £85 each, etc., etc. But they're the average costs. So I think if we get some more definitive costs, that will give us a ballpark figure in which you're actually talking about.
Ballpark somewhere between 15 and 20. Tony.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it cost the parish council Ivy Church, which reinforces what Dylan said.
Sorry, could you say that again? I didn't hear the number.
And about £6,000 introduced from 60 to 40.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean it's not a good scheme or a bad scheme. Obviously, how you raise that money is debatable. But I personally think it is a very dangerous road. A number of times I've come down that hill after the council, which is a bit quick, and had to take a bit of emergency at the bottom. Yes, we've all done it. But I would love to see Dymchurch slow down, because we've got that primary school there. Again. But we all have areas in our divisions where this needs to be done. And I think we should be fairly proactive with this. And I support you, Tim.
Thank you. Okay, I think a slightly amended proposition after the input of Dylan. As I said, I think it's. I agree that I think that the first thing that all of us would prefer would be for the longer scheme, would be for a better longer scheme which included Sandgate Esplanade. 100%. So I think we're. The proposal is that the minutes to show that this board is asking for highways officers and to reconsider and either bring back to this board a scheme for a 20-mile-an-hour zone with the other required stationary measures along the length of the A259 through Sandgate Esplanade and the High Street, or to accept a locally funded scheme, accept as a locally funded scheme the proposals for a 20-mile-an-hour zone around Sandgate High Street, with the works needed to consult with police and funders. And then work with Sandgate Parish Council on that introduction and speed mitigation. So that's the twin track approach. We try and ask KCC if we can do the full big thing, please nicely, and we'll try and work proactively together on making that happen. But if they can't make that happen, if their answer is we genuinely have not got the funding and genuinely not going to do this along Sandgate Esplanade, to at least allow the work to continue in Sandgate High Street, if local funding can be found. And I would take it upon myself to go away and find that local funding. That is what I would try and do. So that's where I'm to, and that's the proposal that I'd like to put forward. And I will move that proposal because actually, I don't know. I don't really need to move it. That's what I like the proposal. That's what I'd like to have the minutes show. So it allows, if we have an indicative vote, that allows the minutes to show who indicative support for that as well. Did anyone else wish to speak before we took that to a vote? Jenny, sorry. Oh, okay, or are you taking it to the vote?
No, I was just going to make one more comment. I've just thought about it. If you were extending it, if you were thinking of extending the zone, I wondered if the proposal could be to extend it as far as Seabrook Primary School, and then Hythe Town Council and Sandgate Parish Council could liaise on that. But I don't want to overcomplicate it because I think the proposal that you've put forward is needed. But I've just thought that might be a good addition.
I entirely accept your point. I think you are entirely right. On the other hand, I've started by trying to bring the simplest, shortest possible proposition, and then we're now going for a longer one. I think the longer we go into this, the more difficulty we wrap into it. If we could go with this proposition for now, I entirely support and could see it being extended a bit further. And I'd like to hope that officers would look at that and consider it anyway. Oh, there's a school a few hundred meters further up there. Perhaps we should think about that too. But let's include that in the minutes that you'd ask that to be considered as well, and hope that they would think about it. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak before we vote? Okay, all those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3.
I'm in favour, Tim. Thank you.
Connor is also in favour, indicating. Okay, so that's everyone in favour with the exception of Rory, who is abstaining or against.
If we're heading towards then extending it even further, which is what I'm reading as the ultimate aim.
This proposition included the Esplanade and High Street. We were going to note that Jenny suggested to the school.
I have no problem with having a report come back, and I asked for a number of issues to be reported back anyway, but it's starting to sort of test my support if actually we're going to end up with something that's extending halfway along Seabrook Road as well.
That's not what this proposal.
Struggling with that one.
That's not what this proposal was saying.
Go to Dymchurch.
It's not what this proposal was saying, Rory. But if you're abstaining on the detail for now, they just say so, and so the minutes can reflect that.
If we're having a report back which is around the central part that you've proposed, I'm perfectly comfortable with that.
It is up to us then to include the Esplanade, because that's where Dylan took that to. So as to a fuller scheme including Esplanade and High Street is. But if they cannot do that, to look at accepting the shorter scheme in Sandgate High Street.
Well, they can bring a report back. I'm not objecting to that.
Okay, I think that was support for that, so I think we're unanimous. Thank you very much. That's the end of the items on our agenda. But Jackie is indicating at me furiously, so I think there's some more AOB there. Jackie.
Thank you. Yes, it's a really, really short AOB. Can we ask Stagecoach to come back and give us an update, please? Because I'm hearing all sorts of problems still with our bus service locally. including their application not working, buses being overcrowded, even though we're being told, no, we're not putting more buses on because it's not paying us. There aren't enough passengers. So I'd really appreciate, on behalf of our residents, if we could invite them back to give us an update, especially as the BSIP money has now run out and I believe the fares are going back up. Thank you.
Okay, very happy to bring that forward. I know Jim is in all too regular contact with Stagecoach, but I'm sure he'd like another meeting, like to see another one. So we'll bring them there. Tony.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just I'd like to give a word of praise to somebody. I rarely do this, but it's amazing. Southern Gas Networks were planning to close my coastal road down 17 weeks completely. And I worked with their communications lady, Helen Peel, who's done a marvellous job, has gone the extra mile. And they Southern Gas Networks are laying a new gas main, and they redesigned the scheme to keep one lane open continuously to allow my lifeboat crew to get there on the shout. And it's also, as I've said before, it's an emergency access road for a nuclear power station. So, but that's just to say that Southern Gas Networks redesigned the scheme. It's working, the single lane at the moment is working very well. So we actually are going to tourist season and people can get through. So I'd just like to say well done to Helen.
I think that both our minutes could reflect that, and potential. And if the minutes can do so, I'm happy that we send a note to Southern Gas Networks and ask them to do that as well, because I know there's big concern about closing that road in both directions for a significant period of time. The fact that there's at least one way running is a big help. Any other items of AOB? I can't see any more people indicating. I can't see Connor at all, so I'm going to assume that that's the end of this meeting at 7:20. Thank you very much indeed for playing. The date of the next meeting will be circulated. Has it been circulated? Can't remember. I've slept recently. Will be recirculated soon. I look forward to seeing you then. Until then, thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Have a good evening.